Hi,
It's
Mr.
wonderful,
Mackenzie.
isn't it, that we can do things like this in today's world, have an interview, have a talk between countries. My wife, Ausha, she talks to her mother in Lithuania every day on Skype. And that's such a wonderful thing that people can do this. You can be in Australia and be speaking to a relative in real time. And this is wonderful. So they say the internet has many bad things, but it has many good things. And I think the good things outweigh the bad. Yeah, I'm ready for you, Rita and children.
We're students from a school located in Abruzzo, in the center of Italy. Thanks to our English teacher, we had the pleasure to read about your interview released to The Guardian. We've been very impressed with your story, so we decided to interview you to discuss about some aspect of your touching experience. Thanks for agreeing to take part in our interview. We also asking you if you could please confirm your agreement to publish this interview on our online school magazine.
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Could I ask one thing, Rita? How did you discover my book?
I just read because I belong to the group, the Canadian group who follow the Foundling Hospital.
Ah.
You know the group on the internet, on the Facebook.
Mm.
I belong to that group. I signed just for a chance. I had the chance to read, and I log in and asked to be part of it. So every news, I read every news on that page. And I had the chance to read the interview or the article about the newspaper. Someone published an article about your book, and I was wondering. I looked for your book, and actually, I have your book on Kindle paper. So I'm going to read the book to the class. Actually, I had a project with every class for the first to the fifth class in my school. I engaged all the students, and they had a lot of researches, and they were very, very happy to find some more news about Victorian age, of course, about the period where the Foundling Hospital began to start to meet to help foundling children. And then we would like to know some more from you, of course, if you don't mind, just because we have the opportunity to talk to the last one, to the people who had some experience, you know?
Yeah. One interesting development, Rita, like you discovering my book, is that they discovered it in Israel. And the University of Jerusalem has made it required reading for their social studies. So that was nice to hear that they. Yeah. Okay, so I've got your questions, Rita. Do you want me to go through them?
The students are going to ask you some question, if you don't mind. They would like to do the question by themselves.
Good. Okay, fire away.
Hi, Mr. Mackenzie. I'm Samuel. Do you have good memories of your childhood?
Yes and no. I was 9 weeks old when the Foundling Hospital took control of me. And the first 5 years, they put you into foster care. They found a mother and father to look after for 5 years. And when I reached 5, I then had to go to the hospital and spend the next 10 years. We wouldn't do a thing like that now. At that time, it was considered acceptable and normal to institutionalize children. But we don't take that view now. We think that children whose homes having difficulty should not spend their time in an institution. They should be fostered. Happy memories about my first 5 years with my foster parents, happy years. Next 10 years, not so happy.
Thank you so much. What kind of experience have you had in the Foundling Hospital?
Well, many, obviously. But you see, when I went there were 600 children. 300 girls, 300 boys. The girls lived on one side of the school, the boys on the other, and we only met in the classroom. Yeah. It obviously is very difficult for the staff to love all 600 children, like in a family home. So for the first year, when I went there at 5, I was not even 5. I was 4 years and 11 months. We went into the infants' quarters. So we weren't in the main school. We were in the school, but not mixed up with the older children. We were in the infants' quarters. And that was a more gentle approach, but it became much harder when we went at 6 into the main school, where a lot of bullying took place, not from the staff so much, but from the older children. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, we got used to it. Children are more resilient, stronger than we sometimes give them credit for. And you just accept your fate, so to speak. And we were all, as we might say in this country, in the same boat. And you just got on with it. I don't know whether we thought this was the way all children grew up. I can't remember whether we did, but you get through it. You do what you have to do.
Thanks. And Mr. Mackenzie, do you think you were lucky in your adoption?
Yeah, I was in my first 5 years, yes. I did have nice parents. Unfortunately, it was the war then. I was born 3 months before the war began. And 4 years after I went to my foster parents, my foster father died of a duodenal ulcer. You wouldn't die of it today, but that was a big trauma. We used to go to the cemetery, and yes, and he was a very nice man, and my foster mother was very nice. So I was lucky there, but that was a big, I can remember quite clearly the loss of him.
Thank you. Another question. When you met your biological mother, did you get on well with her?
Yeah, we did get on well. You see, not all the children were as lucky as me. Some of their mothers had made a new life for themselves. Well, let me explain. The founding hospital had two purposes: to look after the children and educate them, give them a chance in life, and also to give the mother a chance to make a new life for herself. Many of the fathers of the children ran off. Are you with me? They didn't stay with mother, and the mother would often marry and not tell her husband that she'd had a baby. And so obviously the founding hospital didn't want the children to ruin the mother's marriage, if she made a good marriage and she had not told. You see, at that time, people were more judgmental, and a woman that had a baby who was not married, society took a harsh view. Society was not tolerant and understanding as we are now. So they didn't want a child. The founding hospital, when they took over a baby, they did not want that baby 15 years later to discover where its mother was and intrude into her life and maybe ruin her life because she had not told her husband that she had a baby. They wanted to give the mother a chance as well as the baby. You follow me? Yeah? And so they changed the name. When my mother took me to the hospital at 9 weeks, my name was changed. Christian name, surname. I went to the hospital as James Craig, and on the day they took me, I became Tom Humphreys, not Mackenzie. I'm unusual. I'm a man who's had three names. My mother's name, James Craig, my founding name, Tom Humphreys, my mother's name, family name, Mackenzie. Let you ladies have more than one name, but we men usually only have one name all our life. I've had three. Yeah.
Thank you. So, have your past experiences influenced your relationship with your children and women?
I'm sure they have. I believe all of us are affected by what happens in our early life. One thing I do think was wise on the part of the founding hospital, they did not institutionalize the children at birth. So it was all organized. They had it all organized, even having a priest there to give you your new name. And when my mother had to pass me over to them, she didn't know. I do describe it in the book, but she didn't know that that was the last time. They came and took baby and did some tests, so they said, and gave baby back to mother. And then they came again and took baby and did some tests and give baby back to mother. And then they came a third time and took baby, but never came back. Mother sits there waiting for baby, baby doesn't come. That was their way of dealing with that situation, because they understood that it's not easy for the mother. So, yeah, ready for your next question.
Yeah. What can we do to improve children's life in their orphanages?
What can you do to improve children's life in the orphanage? By not having orphanages by putting every child into a home. In this country, we decided many years ago now that institutions, orphanages are harmful, that children from dysfunctional homes and so forth, if they can't live at home, they must live in somebody's home. There are lots of wonderful people who look after children, foster them, not adopt them, foster them. You understand the difference?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so we don't institutionalize children now. There are a few places for delinquent, really problem children who would not even fit into a home, if you understand. Some children are so difficult to handle that it wouldn't be fair to ask foster parents to look after them because they have serious psychological problems. So in a few cases like that, they are looked after, but not in a home for 600. It might be a large country house with maybe 20. You see?
Has your life given you the love that you missed in your childhood?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one. It took me a lot of time to, you might say, learn to love. Because, well, like I said, I did have love for 5 years, and then it was taken away. And for 10 years, there wasn't. One thing it took me a while was to learn to smile. That may sound an odd thing to say, but we didn't have a lot to smile about. And so I did have some difficulties, but strangely enough, I found it easier to relate to women than men. And the boys in the school were all competitive. They, in a way, were like rivals. Yeah. The girls who we met in the classroom, we were more had a kind of view of the girls. We didn't used to fight them, for instance, obviously, yeah. So I got women were kinder to me in my early life. There weren't many men who my foster father was nice, but then he died. But the people who were kind were women. When I became an adult, I found it easier to get along with women because I had a good attitude towards them. Yeah. I've been married 4 times, by the way. My first 2 marriages, I were not good. First, I married a South African, but she didn't like living in Europe, particularly in Britain. She didn't like our climate. She came over on a working holiday, not intending to marry a British man, but she did. But she always wanted to go back to South Africa with its nice climate, and that made a difficulty. And there were other problems with the marriage, so that wasn't good. Then I had a second marriage, another go, and that was not good. I think this may be partly due to my early life. I'm not blaming my wives. I probably wasn't an easy person to be married to. And then my third wife, that was a happy marriage, but she died she died at 47. and that was very sad, very, very sad. Our son came, we had a son. I've had 3 children, by the way. You know, our son came home from school and found his mother dead on the sofa at home. So that was tragic, tragic. And now I'm very happily married for 18 years now to my Lithuanian wife, who you saw. Yeah, did you see Ausra? She said hello to Rita. Yeah, so we've been very happy for 18 years. And I'm 80 next month and in good health, luckily. I think the early years helped our health. Of course, those were war years. The first 6 years of my life were World War II. And food was tight. You didn't have any fat children in those days. Food was rationed, and even the years when the war ended, for maybe 10 years, we didn't starve, but we didn't indulge. Sweets, for instance, were rationed until I was 12 years of age. You couldn't go and buy sweets in a sweet shop like you can now. So I think the children of the founding hospital, because many of them lived long lives, I think they benefited by not having too much food, but also maybe by having a hard early life. It maybe made them strong. I don't know. I'm ready for your next question.
How did your childhood experience influence your point of view about life?
Well, I think all of our lives are determined by our childhood. Not entirely. I mean, we have never understood until recently how much of who we are is our genetic. How much nurture, virtue, and nature. Are we equally made up of how we were brought up, or is our life determined by our genetic inheritance from our mother and father? We now understand better that a very great deal comes from our genetic inheritance. That's not to say that what happens to you in your early life doesn't matter, but they feel now that it's not equal. It's not half of you is your nurture and the other half is nature. Your mother and father also. Yeah, for instance, I write quite a lot of poetry, but so did my mother and father. How do you explain that? We didn't know each other until I was 20. I discovered many things about my mother and father, which relate to myself. I didn't learn these things from my mother and father because I didn't meet them until I was 20. So how is it my mother and father wrote poetry to each other and I write poetry? You understand? And there were other things which surprised me. Because, yeah, I mean, it was interesting to see how much I had got by genetic inheritance.
Mr. Mackenzie, have you ever been to Italy?
You remember the Hebrew University of Jerusalem that has made my book required reading? You remember? the lady professor invited Austra and myself to stay with her in Jerusalem for 1 week. And that was last year. So we had a lovely week in Jerusalem with the lady professor. And yeah, so we certainly will look you up, Rita. What part of Italy are you living in? Where in Italy?
I explain you. We live in Abruzzo, in the center. How can I explain? On the Adriatic coast, on the other side of Rome.
Other side of the
Have
Rome.
you been to Rome?
Rome, yes.
Uh-huh.
We are on the other side, on the Adriatic coast. And we live near the seaside, and we can easily reach the mountain. So it's a better location, you see? You could spend your holiday.
Yes.
What do you think of today's generation?
You face many challenges that we didn't have to face. Social media is one of the biggest ones. We won't know for many years what the effect of social media is on our children today. But what we can guess, it will be big. But you see, I think a lot of the problem is poor parenting. When I was young, parents spent much more time with their children on a one-to-one basis.
That's true, that's true.
You go into a British restaurant now, and you will see a family sat at a table. All four of them are on their mobiles, their smartphone. Mother, father, all of them. They aren't talking to each other. And, you know, it is good that people have a way of contacting their wider family and their friends. But there's a downside to it all. And we don't know at this point in time how serious is the lack. So when I grew up, there were lots of red lines. You didn't do this and you didn't do that. Of course, mine isn't a typical one because, but even in families, when I was young, there was more discipline in the family. Mother and father took a much more hands-on role. The child did not disappear to the bedroom all evening to play games, on their computer and so on. These are various, very serious changes in family life, and we don't quite know how to deal with a lot of them. But like I said at the beginning, the advantages. If I were to be asked what I thought was the most wonderful development in my whole life, I would say the mobile. How do you call them? Smartphone?
Smartphone.
Yeah.
Smartphone. Call it smartphone.
Yeah. I mean, smaller than a cigarette packet, and look what it contains. I have Encyclopedia Britannica 10 times over in my mobile. Anything I want to know, I ask my mobile. I don't even I ask it orally. I just put the question to it. Back comes the answer. All the apps that it has, that little device, smaller than a cigarette packet, has more computing power than the one that was on the Apollo that went to the moon. Much more computing power. And to me, that is an incredible thing. I used to read maps like everybody. When I went to a city that I had never visited, I would manage to find my way to the address, wherever it was in the city. I don't know how I did it, like everybody, but I used maps. Now I just get in my car and I say to my mobile, navigate to PL742L, number 8, and it will take me to that house and stop me. You have reached your destination. And this is all fantastic. And so many other things that mobile can do for me. Right, diagnosis. I'm not feeling well. What's wrong with me? I don't need to go and ask my doctor. I can tell my symptoms into my computer or my mobile, and it will tell me what is most likely wrong. It will even tell me what I need to do to make me better. So we can even use it to help in our health. It is wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. So have a nice day. Thank you, Mr. Mackenzie.
Yes,
Happy Easter.
And happy Easter to you. And I was going to say to you, one thing we shouldn't do is expect too much out of life. I think that maybe young people expect more than perhaps is realistic. If you don't expect too much, then what comes is sometimes good. But we don't do enough. We have a saying here, count your blessings. I'm sure you say that in Italy. Yeah, count your blessings. Look around you. You will see people compared to you. You are lucky. If you look around and you see people who are disadvantaged physically, mentally, sometimes both, count your blessings, and we don't do enough of that, all of us, I'm sure. But have a good Easter, and lovely talking to you. And if, Rita, we in the Rome area, we'll come and have coffee with you. Your lovely cappuccino.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you to both. Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
For all of the class.